Cloud. So once again, my name is Matt. I work with Upper Sugar River Watershed Association. Check us out, uppersugar.org. And for events just like this, come help us out in the field. And I will turn this over to Jenn Simons, and she can introduce herself and this beautiful presentation about grassland birds in Southwest Wisconsin.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. So my name is Jenn. I'm based out of the Driftless Area Land Conservancy, but I coordinate the Southern Driftless Grasslands Partnership right now. And so a little bit about that. So the Southern Driftless Grasslands Partnership is made up of different public and private entities in Southwest Wisconsin. So here on this slide, I threw up some of our logos of some of the folks we work with the most. So you'll see it's a mix of nonprofits, state, federal agencies, land trusts. And basically we all just really care about grasslands in Southwest Wisconsin. And so we're working together to create, improve, and protect grasslands in Southwest Wisconsin to benefit the region's wildlife, water, farms, and communities. And so what does that mean? So we do a lot of outreach and education on grasslands, why they're important. We try and coordinate all of our efforts together. So we're talking to one another between agencies, which doesn't always happen. We're being very intentional about it and learning from one another about what matters, what we should be teaching people about. And then we're also able to combine some of our financial and technical assistance resources. So one of the parts of my role is that I can meet with private landowners and connect them with different funding sources that we know of, or different ways to get help to do projects that get more grass on the ground. And so this slide just shows our region for some context. So everywhere in gray is where we do work and promote our efforts. You'll notice these yellow areas here. I'll talk about these more a bit later, but these are bird conservation areas. And all you need to know now is that this is where we really target our efforts. So these are the most important areas to us. And so down here we have, this is right around Perry Primrose Township. And for context, and here is where we're looking at with the watershed that we're dealing with. So it's in our area. It's an important location that we care about getting more grass on the ground for. So all of us here today, if you want to throw in the chat or even share a little bit, I'd love to know a bit about you all for this conversation. So where are you coming from? Do you own land? What do you want to talk about tonight? And then what's your favorite bird? So feel free to post that in the chat or turn on your video and share. I can definitely, so my favorite bird is actually not a grassland bird. I really love American bitterns, if only because of the crazy sounds that they can make. You'll find them in a lot of wetlands, and they have these really long necks that they can stretch up, and they're striped along their neck, and they'll kind of like wave their heads. They look like grass. Great camouflage.
This is Matt. I am from Milwaukee originally. I do not own any land. My folks have property in Waukesha. I hope to learn about the cool sounds of the birds because I'm always being asked as a naturalist what that is. And I always say, I don't know a lot about birds. I really like corvids, blue jays, ravens, crows. I think they're really neat. So I'll go with that whole family.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Matt. And maybe we'll hear from some of you others throughout tonight.
Yeah, I'm Robert.
Oh, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, again, thanks, Jenn. I'm the board president for Upper Sugar River, and then I also have helped develop and lead a dragonfly citizen science project. And so certainly some of the dragonfly conservation work is connected to grassland, certainly the edge grasslands. And so I'm interested in that aspect. And I don't own land here, but I do own some land that is pastured in Eastern Tennessee, an old family farm that I think one day, hopefully I can get into conservation. When I first came to Wisconsin, I remember seeing a lot of bobolink, and I hadn't seen bobolink before, and I just fell in love with them. I wouldn't say they're my favorite bird, kind of like Matt. I think crows are sort of birds that I'm really passionate about, but I think bobolinks pose some interesting conservation challenges, and so I'm hoping to learn more about that tonight. Thank you.
Great choice in bird. We'll definitely talk about bobolinks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Gregory.
Okay. I live in Belmont, Wisconsin, Lafayette County, and we do own land, and we've had the NRCS come out and tell us that probably about 75 acres of our property is, partially native prairie, buggered up a bit by, farming techniques, but there's still some different, wild grasses and stuff out there. We're already involved in a pollinator habitat project that have been interested in what you're doing and what's out there to go ahead and promote the grassland birds, because we've left the area unpastured at this time, so that at some point we can tie into some kind of grant or whatever and actually do something with the land.
Great. Yeah, hopefully I'll have some topics, some thoughts you can have for your land later on in this presentation.
Hi, this is Melissa. I currently reside in Madison. I don't own land and actually don't know a lot about grassland birds. I used to research shorebirds. So my favorite bird is the piping plover.
Oh, great choice. They're so cute.
They make the cutest noises, and yeah.
Thanks for sharing. All right, if that's everyone, I'll keep moving forward. And I'll start us off with kind of a sobering note. So I'm guessing a lot of you might have heard about this report that came out in Nature a couple of years ago, sharing that we've lost about 3 billion birds since 1970. So this research was based on the breeding bird surveys, which we started doing around 1970, and that data has shown that we're losing a lot of our birds. So in other words, 1 in 4 birds we've lost since 1970. Not all birds have decreased at the same rate, so this kind of shows the difference. So we're losing all types of birds, forest birds, shorebirds, but especially grassland birds. We've lost over half of our grassland birds since 1970. And so they're a type of bird group that we really need to watch out for. And I'm curious, I want to get into some of the reasons why we've lost so many grassland birds in particular. And to do that, I want you all to look at this picture here. This is from the 1937 air photo, and this shows the state natural area for the Upper Sugar Creek here. And if you can just put in the chat or go ahead and share things you can see about this photo that seem like they might have changed in the last 70 plus years. I know for me, when I look at this photo, some of the things that I'm seeing are these tiny little patchwork. So you're seeing a pretty big diversity of land type across the area, and a lot of it's rural. You're not seeing a ton of development, maybe some like farmsteads, but nothing really urban or dense. And so if we compare 1937 to a more present day aerial photo of the region, you can definitely see development for one is coming in over here in Verona. So this is a little bit older. This is before the high school was fully done being built. And you have Epic all up in here. And the farmscape is different. So we have a lot more row crops, a lot bigger area of row crops. Some areas have a few more trees, but in general, I guess I can go back so you can look at that again. The landscape has changed a lot. And so you can kind of assume from this and from what you see around you, the largest reason that we've been losing our grassland birds is because of habitat loss and habitat degradation. Much of it urban development and agricultural conversion. And so with that in mind, I have a chart here from Partners in Flight, which is an organization whose motto is that they want to keep common birds common. So they're looking to protect our birds and keep a watch on birds before it's too late or too difficult to try and protect their populations. And so in 2016, they came out with this report and they listed certain birds that are the most important based on different regions. So this photo on the left is showing the region that we're included in, and this chart on the right is the list of birds that they came up with that should be prioritized and monitored and habitat should be managed for. So specifically, we're in this bird conservation region 23. And so if you look at that column here, we're looking at Henslow sparrows, bobolinks, and the eastern meadowlark. This column over here, the numbers aren't super important to know. Anything in red means that this area is of very high importance for that bird. And so, for example, the Henslow sparrow, we have 53% of the breeding bird population in Wisconsin, which is a huge chunk of their population to be responsible for. This column over here is showing how many years before 50% of the population is lost. And so for eastern meadowlark, I mean, in 24 years, we could lose another 50% of what's left of the eastern meadowlark. And then here we have our long and short-term trends. So the long-term change is over 40 years, short-term is over the last few years. Most of them are declining, which we already know. And so after that, you might be asking, like, what does it take? What do we need to do to protect these bird species? And that varies, perhaps unsurprisingly, by the species with the habitat type that we need to look for. So unlike different plant species, birds are really particular about these three things. So they're really looking for the difference in vegetation height density, which I have this graphic here showing what that means. So on the left, we would say this has a high vegetation height density. So the grass is really high and it's really dense. And so this tool right here is called a Robel pole. And you would look at this Robel pole and you want to see what number is the most visible. So this would be like at a level of 9, whereas this would have low height density and be at like a level of 1. And so birds are really considering that density in the plant cover that they're seeing. They're also looking at litter depth and cover. I really like this bottom photo because you can actually kind of see what makes up the litter. So it's above the soil line, it's any of this kind of dead vegetation that's accumulated. And so often you'll see that litter accumulate if it's been a long time since a burn or if an area has never been grazed. That's where all that dead matter is just building up. And so that's the litter. And then grassland forb cover. So picture on the left would be a high example of a high ratio of grass to forb cover. Picture on the right is showing a greater ratio of forbs to grasses. Forb is just referring to anything that's flowering. And so these are the three big areas that we can look at what birds need to decide whether or not their habitat is suitable for them. And then I want to go back to our 3 birds that we know are important for this region and give a little bit more information about them each. So this is the Henslow sparrow. It's a very cute little bird, and they're considered to be part of a tallgrass species group, which just means that they like really tall and dense vegetation. So over 14 inches in height. They want a lot of litter. So they're going to want to be in an area that's not been recently burned or grazed because they'll nest into that litter and build their nest on the ground. They want a great proportion of grasses, which is going to be great for building up that litter. And they have a variable size of area that they need to support their population. So between 25 to 250 acres. And this photo here kind of shows an example of that. So you can see it's all among the Canada goldenrod, pretty dense and tall vegetation. And then here I have a video, but my computer has not been playing them, so we might just get sound. But I want you to listen to the Henslow sparrow's call. It's very short. Can you all hear that? You can just, Yep, okay, great. So it's this So it's a very short little twitter. Right there. So I mean, if that was hard for you to hear, like imagine doing that in person and outside. They're a very hard bird to find because not only are they small and brown and stripy, they make this very short secretive call, and they'll spend a lot of their time deep in the grass in this litter layer. And so we know an okay amount about them in their breeding area, but we don't know a ton about them in their non-breeding area because they're just so secretive and so hard to find and listen to. Okay, and then our next bird, the bobolinks. So unlike the henslow, these are considered a midgrass species group. So they are looking for a height density of their vegetation to be between 6 to 14 inches. They don't need quite as thick of a litter layer, and they're more flexible with their grass to forb ratio. So it can be a 1-to-1. You'll often see them like perched on more stiff forbs or on different shrubs in the grassland. And they need 25 to 250 acres. So again, a pretty broad amount of space that they need. Bobolinks are also interesting because they are polyamorous, I guess, unlike a lot of other grassland birds. So oftentimes, not only will the male bird have multiple females that it will mate with, the female bird will mate with multiple males. So you'll end up with a nest that has different fathers. The male bird will tend their primary nest with the female bird, but they'll also occasionally help out with the other nest that they helped father these chicks with, which is a really interesting structure that they have for their community. They also will live in flocks usually during the non-breeding season. So they'll kind of gather up together toward the end of the breeding season and head south. And so this is a photo, again, showing an example of bobolink habitat. Like I said, they'll perch on a lot of these more stiff forbs. This is a female bobolink. They look quite a bit different. And then now for the bobolink's call. So I'll let you listen to it first. So all of this is a bobolink choir. And so a lot of times people will think of the bobolink as like the R2-D2 bird because it's just this like crazy jumble of different sounds, and you'll just hear them doing that all together, and it can get pretty loud. It's very distinct, and not a lot of other birds sound quite like that. So they can be a lot of fun. All right, and then the eastern meadowlark is our last one that we'll go over. So they're another midgrass species group, pretty similar to the bobolink, 6 to 14 inches height density. They do want a higher litter layer, same medium grass to forb ratio. They don't require a lot of space. So you can get meadowlarks nesting and thriving on areas 6 acres and more. And they're, I think around like 90% of where you'll find them is on crop fields, whether or not that's like hay or alfalfa. So they really rely on private land to be protected. And they're also one of the first birds that I think a lot of people learn to recognize. I've gone on several landowner visits, and this is the bird that they mentioned that they remember hearing when they were younger, because they're very striking and they have a really nice song that we'll listen to in a little bit. And so this is just a picture of what you might expect for their habitat as well. And then here is their song. So it's a very clean whistle. So the mnemonic device for an eastern meadowlark is spring of the year, which sometimes some people think it matches really well. It's not always what I hear. It's more of that like slurry whistle that's very distinct. But spring of the year, and they're one of the first birds to come back and start nesting. So they do really kind of mention that winter's over, we're here, it's going to be summer. All right, so what do we do with this information? So we know birds are declining. We know grassland birds in particular are really struggling. We know that we have these certain types of birds in our region that we need to protect. Now what? Sometimes I like to think of just sitting in this nest and kind of screaming with this information because it's hard to know what to do. Like, how can we change this trajectory? So to start off with, Southwest Wisconsin is special. So this map is showing areas in the Great Lakes region that have remaining contiguous grasslands. So areas of land where there's still connection between grasslands and still an opportunity to protect that. And if you look at Wisconsin, it's pretty obvious that Southwest Wisconsin is one of the last chances that we have to preserve that. So we have some semblance of what remains, and we have a good chance to keep protecting that and supporting grassland birds in this contiguous grassland. Another way to illustrate that, here we have our bobolink. This map here is done using data from eBird and working with UW. These results haven't been published anywhere that I know of yet, but this area in black is showing the southern driftless grasslands region, and areas in red have a higher likelihood of continued bobolink abundance. So central sands have a pretty decent density of bobolinks, but also Southwest Wisconsin is definitely a stronghold for them. Additionally, meadowlarks. So in particular, meadowlarks, I should say, I think we have around 16% of the total population of meadowlarks in the state is in this boundary. And we've lost 3 and 4 meadowlarks. So this photo again comes from the that 3 billion birds report. So we have high potential in where we are to do something to protect and support these birds. And so what that can look like at the local scale is preserving and encouraging biodiversity. So biodiversity could include a range of different species. Like I mentioned before, we want to look at height and density of plants as well. And then also looking at our communities that are more rare in this region or declining, which would be our grassland and savanna. So doing whatever you can to support grassland and savanna that's diverse. The next thing is incorporating disturbances. Grasslands are disturbance dependent systems, which means they need something to happen to make sure that there's not that succession to a woodland. And so some examples of disturbance that we could have are burning and mowing and grazing. And so incorporating these tools in the right context and the right timing for your management is a good way to increase bird habitat. In particular, I mentioned the differences in litter layers that these birds need. And so these disturbances will create different amounts of litter layers, which will support different species of birds. So we need a diversity of disturbance. And then refugia. So for example, like I mentioned with the meadowlark, they use a lot of private lands and a lot of crop fields. Typical bird nesting season is going to be around May 15th to July 15th. It varies a little bit, but that's the broadest range. And so if folks can not mow, not graze, not do a disturbance on their land in the state range, this will allow for grassland birds to build a nest, lay their eggs, and raise their young and get out of the way so that we can kind of use that land to also support the people who are living in the area. And then also context matters. And so what I mean by that, here I have 2 different photos. It matters what's around your land. So for example, on the left, if you had this parcel of land here that you were like, I'm gonna plant this into my prairie, I'm gonna have my native and warm season grasses, it's gonna be great. And that's wonderful, we would love that. But it would be great also if you look at your surrounding edges. So here we have sedge meadow, old field, and cool season grasses, and these are all actually really compatible for grassland birds. And so if you're able to, one, create your great habitat and spend a lot of work on that, but also have the surrounding land be at least somewhat compatible, you're increasing the amount of area that's usable by birds. So rather than this tiny little postage stamp here, you're actually getting a benefit from this whole landscape. And that's a little bit more apparent on this picture on the right. So this is an example of what a working farm might look like. So here you have this idle grassland. And so you're thinking of that, this is what I'm setting aside for the birds. I won't bother them, they can have this. But then you're also having compatible land uses. So you have your postage stamp of idle grassland, and here you're rotating your corn, hay, oats, and wheat. Hay and oats and wheat are going to be a little bit better for the birds. So you're giving them opportunities to expand beyond this boundary into here. Pasture, you're going to have a lot of good grassland that they can use. Hopefully you're grazing in a way that's manageable. And so you're increasing the impact that you can have by concentrating on your core, but then also looking in the context around you and trying to make that compatible. All right, and so if we think about local and then start to go toward a more regional approach, we can think about our different conservation programs that exist. And so this graphic shows when different types of farm bill conservation programs were introduced and the impact that had on different types of birds. So this bottom line here is our grassland birds. And you can see that here at this grassland dot, when we started doing grassland easements, and here at this gray dot, when we started doing CRP, we've kind of stabilized our grassland bird populations a little bit. Definitely not in the way that we've impacted our wetland birds. So here's when we started doing wetland easements, and our wetland birds have shown great response to that. All this is to say that these programs can work if we improve them and build upon them. They can have a difference in bird populations. There's a lot of potential to keep working with CRP and different farm bill programs to increase the amount of grassland birds that we have. And then down here, I have some logos of some of the organizations, not all of them, that offer support for landowners to learn more about how to do conservation on their land and then also fund it. So I mean, DNR, Partners for Fish and Wildlife, the federal program, our local land and water conservation districts, and then land trusts and farm bill biologists are all great ways to make an impact on your land and get some help to do that. All right, so from this regional scale of what do I do on my land, what programs do I have to do this on my land, how do we pull that all together? And so one way we can do that is with bird conservation areas, and this is a concept from Partners in Flight. And so the whole idea with this is to build upon our individual actions to make a big impact. And so in order to support birds, they're looking at this model of a 2,000 acre core of high quality permanent grassland surrounded by land that makes up 10,000 acres of open area for birds. And so within these 10,000 acres that surround your core, you have a mix of permanent grass cover, a mix of long-term protection, so CRP, pasture, and then the balance is just privately owned land that's probably being worked. It's either ag land or it's woodland. Ideally, it's not developed. But then you end up with this 10,000 area that's decently open with this high quality core that will support a range of grassland birds. And here's an easier way to visualize this. So this is an example of what it could look like. Here in green, we have our 2,000 acre core and then patches of permanent and long-term grassland that make up a 10,000 acre parcel. And then this is even more smaller scale. So this is the kind of stuff that I would look at when I'm looking at a map and thinking about landowners. I'm looking at what is the surrounding land. So in this area, we have perhaps some state-owned land that's being protected. Areas in green might have an easement, which just means that they're not going to be developed on ever. These areas in yellow, we might know could be bought or sold. We don't know what the landowner's up to. And then these blue properties might be areas that we know the landowner is interested in. And so we're thinking, how can we maximize the impact that we're going to have for grassland birds by talking to these folks and supporting these landowners adjacent to these compatible lands. All right, and I would be remiss to leave out two of the top apps that you can use to monitor and enjoy grassland birds. The first of which is eBird, which I assume most of you are familiar with, but it's a way to track birds that you're seeing and submit that. And then eBird does a ton of really great work with this citizen science that they're gathering and a lot of analysis on how our grassland bird populations are doing. So if you're out and looking at birds, you can just turn on the app and mark what you see, and that'll be used for some great science. And then there's Merlin, which also came out of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is where eBird came from. And Merlin is great if you're learning birds. So they have a way to identify which bird you see based on the size of the bird, the color of the bird, and where you saw the bird. They also now are able to ID birds using sound and photos. You can upload a sound or a photo and it'll help tell you what bird you probably saw. And it bases that on where you're located. So it's using all this data from eBird and it's saying, you're here, it's this time of the year, odds are this is what you're seeing. And then it'll give you a list of birds that you can look at, and you can click on those. You can listen to examples of their songs or calls and read a little bit about the birds. And you can even like mark that you saw it and it'll sync with your eBird list. So these are all great tools for beginning and people who just like to go out birding a lot. And with that, I will open it up to folks who have questions or comments. And it looks like there's some things in the chat that I missed. So I'll start with the chat, and then if folks want to like type or just talk over me. So the first is from Robert. What is known about changes in the gene pool of these grassland species of interest? That's a good question, and I'm not sure. I think it does help, like you said, maintain the genetic variation in the gene pool. I'm not sure if bobolinks are seeing a benefit in their way that they're breeding compared to like meadowlarks, which are more monogamous. Great question. I hope someone's looking into it. And then, do we have eastern and western meadowlark overlapping populations? Yes, we do. So Southwest Wisconsin is a stronghold for eastern meadowlarks. We used to have more western meadowlarks. They can come up here. Western meadowlarks are usually in areas that are a little bit drier and obviously further west, but they do come here. Oftentimes you'll find them on the tops of hillsides that are left in hay, which are left in a permanent grass, which are getting like rarer and rarer. So it's getting harder to find western meadowlarks here, but they do technically overlap. Any other questions from folks?
Great stuff. Thanks for the great presentation. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Sounds great.